So the office celebrated its 30th anniversary.
Wow.
And this year. And so we were in a little, really a house in Venice, in Oakwood, in the Oakwood section of Venice, when Venice was very, very different when we began in 1989 for a couple of years. And then we moved to a wonderful little storefront on Palms, kind of in Mar Vista, where we had, it was 800 square feet. It was a little storefront, and there had been I don't know what was in there before us. Maybe it was a realtor or something, but in any case, there was a big sign on the front, like a lit sign. It was like 5 feet by 12 feet.
Oh, that's a big sign.
Which, of course, we had no use for. But we changed it out for a letterboard, like a marquee sign. And so we, where you put we used to put quotes of various sorts to the neighborhood every week. We would, on Friday afternoon, the painful thing was to figure out, okay, what are we going to say this week? But it was fun.
Were they architectural quotes, or was it anything and everything?
They were anything. And, sometimes they were about maybe urban issues. I can remember one, like every increment of construction should be done in a way that, enhances the city, which I think was a Lewis Mumford quote. But, so it varied. So sometimes they were architect related. Other times, maybe it was a musician, something, various things. Generally it was positive reaction. There was occasionally, I think the one that got us the most negative attention from some people, I didn't mind. Maybe this was way back. So it was a quote from, I don't know if you know about this, but during the Reagan administration, Edwin Meese, the Attorney General, put out a report on pornography. And there was a quote from this feminist, Susie Bright, who wrote, it was, I'm going to probably get this wrong, but it's something like, something to the effect of, I masturbated to the Meese Commission report, wonderfully, something like that. It was, just...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that one elicited some responses.
Yeah, definitely some of the neighbors didn't like that.
That's pretty funny. This crazy thing is, so we were doing a bit of research and things, and I've known your office for quite some time, but your bachelor, you both went to Cal Poly. I'm a Cal Poly graduate from SLO, actually, also. Mm-hmm. But your bachelor's was not in architecture, right?
That's right. So I mean, maybe as someone who truly has wanted to be an architect since I was a kid, it's the only thing I can imagine doing. Yeah, but definitely when I was there and enjoying architecture, but I also felt, I think, as a 19-year-old, I don't know, like I guess I felt I wanted to understand more or something. And so I took on this engineering science major as well, which was just very much heavy physics, lots of math. I don't know what I was really thinking. But, and so I finished that and then decided rather than stay and finish the second bachelor's in architecture, I would leave. And it was sort of time to get out of there and start, and in a way, college, you develop your group of friends. We had our really wonderful group of friends. In fact, a bunch of us just got together, about 30 of us, a couple weeks ago.
Whoa. Wow.
From San Luis Obispo. So these are people I'm definitely close to, but it was sort of time to get away and be I felt like to be by myself and explore architecture again. And so I left and went to the University of Colorado and got a graduate degree there.
Wait, so when you were in SLO, was the goal to do a dual degree? Well, did you take architecture courses?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I started as just an architecture major.
Okay.
And then a couple of years into it,
switched over to the engineering.
Yeah. And then could have gone back to the architecture to finish and decided I could spend 3 years here doing that or get the graduate degree. And I felt at that point that like I said, I felt like I just wanted to leave. It was really more emotional about, hey, let's start over.
Well, otherwise
start over
it would
in another place.
Right. Otherwise you would have been in SLO for like 8 years or something. Okay. Well, that's
it's a wonderful place, but
yeah.
I don't know. I think it's more about, I really do a little bit just about starting fresh in a new place and being alone, right? To be able to explore architecture by myself again, without this wonderful group of friends that we were sort of all exploring architecture together.
So the group of people you're talking about were all architecture majors?
Mostly architects, landscape architects, graphic designers. Somehow that was our kind of posse in San Luis Obispo.
I don't know if I'd say that's unique because it depends on the period. But when I was there, the architecture student body could be very, very insular. So it's pretty cool that you guys were kind of made up of different, majors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we all met together on, what is it? Is it Dexter lawn? On the lawn.
Yeah,
like there was just sort of,
there we go.
We got to know each other. And the other part of that, Leo and I, we lived together in this place that no longer exists called the Ark. And this was kind of a commune. It was an old hotel that had been, I think, already deemed unsafe, but the owner rented the building to us. I remember I paid $62.50 a month.
50 cents.
Yeah. There were 13 of us. And because it was an old hotel, we all each had our own room. And we would cook dinner. 2 of us would cook dinner for the rest 6 nights a week. It would switch off every night except Saturday. Is my memory of that. And it was kind of amazing. And I think there was also that mix of architects, mostly some landscape and some graphic designers.
So how is it that from when you were really young, you knew that architecture was going to be the passion, or you were interested in it? Did you see like a building, you're like, yeah, that's really cool, I want to do that? Or is it?
No, I think, truly, I think that for me, and still really, my kids would say this. At the beach, I'll start digging and building sandcastles. And I just, wherever it was, I think I like to make things in the dirt, in our backyard. I can remember raking leaves on the lawn into kind of the pattern of a floor plan, just like making rooms and hallways. And really we would go visit people's houses. I can remember coming back and trying to draw the house.
Really?
I think it's just, there's something, it's always been visual too, by the way. It's just always about, I think, what it feels like, what does this look like? What does it feel like? It's always been about that. Mm-hmm. So, but truly, I think for me, my first memories of buildings in my parents are both from Amsterdam, but I was born in LA. And I definitely have memories. We lived, as a baby, we lived in Hollywood and then Encino, so moved to the suburbs, but definitely memories of being at Barnsdale Park and the Hollyhock House, or the Griffith Observatory, definitely those sort of buildings. But I think with architecture, in terms of something I really remember, I think it's really Rustic Canyon and some of those early 70s homes of Ray Cappy that I think are the first where, wow, these incredible modern houses among the trees.
Right.
And I think for me, and probably as a kid, I spent a lot of time in nature. I think my family was pretty good about getting out. So I think that seeing those houses in that beautiful canyon among these redwoods and oaks and sycamores that he designed, just driving down Brooktree or Latimer. Yeah, I think those are memories.
Did you grow up in a designed house of some kind, like, a modern house or a famous architect or anything like that?
No. Definitely a very, a little, truly like, 1,400 square foot post World War II little house is so no, not at all. We did have, I think this probably comes from maybe my parents' backgrounds, or coming from Holland, but we definitely had, I think we had some nice Scandinavian furniture in the house, though. There was a bit of a modern tendency. And I do remember, too, and I don't know if this sort of, I think, goes to the Dutch roots. And I do think this affects me in some ways, but I do remember in the house when this was post-World War II house. So, it had basic windows and doors and all that to the street and on the sides, the back. And I remember they replaced the small front window that faced the street with a big glass window that faced the street, which I don't know if you've ever been to Amsterdam and Dutch sort of society. There's definitely a thing about when you walk those streets, the curtains are always open and you can look into people's flats, their apartments. Yeah. It's probably, I think it doesn't necessarily come from the best place, but I think it has to do with sort of this Protestant culture there of, hey, we're not hiding anything. We have nothing to hide. And so, but it's sort of, it's something that carries on today, that versus other places, when you walk down the streets in the evenings, you really, I think people are very aware of this. You sort of can very beautifully look into people's lives and their apartments. And I think that sort of indoor, outdoor, even at that level, sort of glassiness is, transparency, openness is something that I think still stays with me somehow.
I could kind of see that, with the work that you guys have done. Are single family residential projects your favorite to work with now?
Yeah, even though the office now is pretty large, I think
it's 200 people.
Right.
So let me say also, I've known the office for a while and know the work. And in my mind, my assumptions, I assume that this is, I don't know if I delete the more boutique office. It's got to be a small operation because things are very well, the designs feel very crafted, whatever that means. And then I was looking online and it said like 200 people or 180. I'm like, wait, what?
Well, but it's deceiving because really in the office, it's probably half that. It's about 90.
Yeah.
And so it's still not tiny at all. Yeah. I think we can do anything we want with 90 people. But and this has been this way for a while. When the office was 100 people, it was about 50. And the other 50 are on the construction side. Mm-hmm. And now at 180, it's the same. There's 90 roughly in the office. So the design employees and support staff. Mm-hmm. And then in the field at different sites, or we have a cabinet shop and a metal shop in El Segundo. There's about, I think, like 35 people there. So between the guys in the shop and then the finish carpenters and the site supers and the laborers and the concrete guys and the landscape guys and all of that, there's this other 90 that are building the work of the office. So in the office, it's about 90, which again, still is not tiny at all. And I think it's plenty. And I think that, I think residential, single family residential is probably still my personal favorite thing to do. And it's probably still more than half of the work that the office does. But we are doing lots of other things, and it's been fascinating. We're doing a big hotel resort in Puerto Rico right now, a Four Seasons on the beach, and we're doing a high-rise downtown that's over 60 stories tall. That's been like going to school again in the very best way, So, but I do love single-family residential, and probably because we are design builders,
right?
That is another. It plays well into that design buildability where we can really design and then craft it exactly the way we believe it should be.
Yeah.
So those houses that you design, the interior, the cabinets and everything, it's your team that's building it?
Often, yeah. Probably, of the work we do in California, let's say the residential work we do in California, 3/4 of it, we're our own GC. There are other times where a client, they have a general contract they worked with before, they want to continue doing it, or they don't believe in the design build process and they want us to be their architect, but they want someone else to be their contractor, and we'll do that. But I think that, personally, I think we all feel the quality and the experience is best when we can control all aspects. And then, in those conditions, generally, we'll do all the cabinetry, we'll do all the carpentry, any ornamental metals, all of that.
But a client would be hesitant to go down that road because they don't like the idea of it all being under one umbrella.
Sometimes.
And they want to make. I'm role playing. Maybe the client feels like by having a separate contractor, there's going to be more different people keeping others in check.
I think so, right? The traditional, I shouldn't say traditional, but the professional model. The traditional model, right, hundreds of years ago was this design build model, right? The architect was that master builder. But I think as architecture became a profession, you really had contractor, architect, and owner, that triangle. And so the AIA agreements are generally really set up for that. And people sort of, I think, in some broad way, believe in that sort of check and balance of architect and contractor. I think from our experience, I don't think it functions that way that well. I think you end up with a lot of politics where, the contractor wants to be careful what they say and the architect needs to be very careful what they say. And so you end up, I think, not having the most clear, best conversations to get to the best piece of architecture in the most, honestly, cost-effective and just best way.
Yeah.
But some people still, it's hard to convince everybody of that. Our best clients, I think, are the people who have built previously in the traditional.
And they know the headache.
Yeah, they know, and that the owner so often gets caught in the middle.
Yeah.
And they really appreciate that, hey, you guys are going to take responsibility for everything. So we're taking responsibility for it, sure, aesthetically, financially, and practically, right? That it's, if there's a leak, if there's a problem, well, it's our problem.
Right. So was from the very beginning when the office was started, which the other fascinating thing is that the office was founded just a few years after you both had finished school, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. 3 or 4.
3 or 4 years,
yeah.
Right. Which I feel like is pretty quick after 3 or 4 years. Looking back, do you guys feel like that was a good idea to start so early? Because I think for a lot of young professionals, the question is, I want to start my own office. I don't know how long to wait because it's architecture takes a long time to build. So should I practice for 10 years before do my own thing, or just do it because that's what I want to do?
Yeah. I don't, okay. I can tell you what happened with ourselves, and I will say this too, in the office, whenever an architect in our office or a designer, someone who's not licensed yet, decides they're going to leave the office to go do their own thing, I always understand that. I get the motivation to try to do this on your own. I get it. Versus if there's a good architect in our office who leaves to go work for another architect, down the street or something. What did we do wrong? Why are they leaving? That's terrible. Then it's very disappointing. But when someone leaves to go do their own thing, I so understand that desire to just be in complete control and to try that. I think this is really, I don't think there's anything very unusual for a young Los Angeles designer, because we weren't licensed architects at that time. And when we began practicing on our own, I think the first year or two we were not licensed because you don't, in LA, if you're doing small residential projects or little commercial, you really don't need to be. So I think what happened with us was that we were working for other architects full time. We were friends along with others of our group that were in LA. And I think, as happens sometimes in Los Angeles, through friends or different things, we started doing, a little kitchen remodel, a little a little addition to some house, maybe a little cafe. I mean, all these are very low budget, kind of tiny projects. Mm-hmm. And I think there was just a certain point where, why don't we work on these things together? Okay, and so you do that. And then, you know what? I think it's time. There's enough here. I'm going to leave my job and, I'll start doing this full time. And that's what happened. And then 6 months later, I think Leo left his and you're doing it. But I think it was very organic. Mm-hmm. And I think had there not been enough work to sustain that, I think we probably wouldn't have done it. So it's just sort of the timing worked out that way.
So the other thing is that the work has a certain, I don't know what you would call it, but let's say style or aesthetic. There's something continuous between the different projects, but there's definitely variety still. Do you have a sense of where that balance lies between all the different things, especially now that you guys are much bigger than like a 10-person team? You have a lot of things going on.
Look,
you just do it.
Well, no. I think it's not easy. In fact, I was having a conversation with a very senior person in the office who's a really wonderful designer who we've worked together in the office now for more than 20 years, and I think it's not easy. I'll say here. I think that. It's obviously if the office was smaller, it would be simpler, I think, to have that continuity of design and comfort. It's not to say designing is easy. It's never easy, and it takes to do anything well. I think to do any building well, it takes a lot of time and effort and working through the issues of that site and that program to get to something that you're really happy with. So I think at this point, it's really about having a great team of people. And I do think we have a lot of people this group who's been together for a long time, in many cases, more than 20 years. And so I think we can at least have very open, honest conversations with each other about things as someone's sketching and we get back together and crit through that and kind of work through that and draw through that. I think there's very little kind of personal, I don't think anyone takes it very personally. I think we're able just to talk and be honest, to work through things, to kind of, I think that the atmosphere of the office that way is quite light. I think that I think for me personally, I think I see the day, I kind of go through the day as kind of just a dark comedy where I guess I mean that you have to sort of make fun of it. It's busy and there's things happening, and because of construction, there's always some issue happening on site, and you have to kind of make light of it and work through it and not really get upset about it, but make fun of it.
Right.
And on the design side, there's a lot of work, but I think it's mostly having really good people. Because I know for myself, because there's so many projects, I can provide direction and give a sense of where I believe it should go. But other people in the office, I'm relying on them to then sit down and do the day-to-day work, and then we'll sit down and go through things and sketch over. But it is more of that sort of role, which I'm not always totally comfortable with, but it sort of has to be that way. Well, like my own house that I recently moved into in Mandeville Canyon. So of course that's something where, okay, I'm just drawing this by myself, right? And I didn't hand it off to anybody until...
Is this the bar?
Yeah, I didn't hand that off to anybody until...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Until, okay, here's the schematic design's done, and now, okay, and then I'm gonna work with people beyond that. But I have to be more open, or there's no way we could do it. But the longevity of the team is what allows it to happen.
I mean, that's going to be an interesting going back transition, from when you're smaller to where you're doing everything, which is really challenging. Yeah. And then getting to a point where obviously that doesn't make sense anymore. So you have to find this other workflow, and was that kind of transition difficult, especially I feel like with single family houses, which are very intimate things.
Yes.
And there's custom, there's a lot of different pieces. They're very complex. We're not talking about a basic box.
This is one of the things I love about single family homes is that the intimacy of the relationship with the client, as well as the house itself and what that expression is. It's why it's so fun. Yeah. But I think as far as the transition from small office to large, again, remember this is 30 years. so that it's not, it's so incremental that I think if you have a good group of people and there's a lot of consistency with that group, we're talking about things that are playing out over years.
Right.
So it's not as, it's not, you're not making decisions about, okay, well, now we have to do it this way.
Right.
It's really, that transition is happening very slowly over years. And I think that's what makes it possible to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned that you designed and live in your own house, which we've seen. There's, I think, an Architectural Digest article that we saw.
This was in Architectural Digest, and then it's in a GA Houses issue.
Yeah, right.
In a more architectural way. It's
right. Yeah.
It's kind of
interesting.
It's kind of. I mean, the whole press thing is interesting, but it's kind of. This one was sort of. This is the third house I've been able to do for myself. We do one, live there, sell it, then do the next one, sell it, and then now this is the third one. But it's fascinating because Architectural Digest article is so. It's about the architecture, but it's a lot about just the stuff in the house too,
right.
and the people, like
and the lifestyle of
me and my family
Yeah.
are a big part of it, and had to be for it to be published really in that place. And then GA Houses, it's a whole different kind of shoot and very architectural, and it's kind of wonderful to have both.
So you're working on your next one?
Oh no! No,
well, you just moved into this one.
We've been in this house for 3 years. And
okay.
Fortunately, I mean, this is really exactly how it feels. For me to be able to do this third house, I needed to sell the second house, right? So I remember we were in escrow on the new tear-down property for the new house, and we also were in escrow selling the second house, and we were going to rent something in between. And I was designing the new house, and I remember, the first maybe month or so of trying to work the design and thinking to myself, shit, we're selling a really good house and we're going to have crap. Like, just as you're trying to work through the design.
Right.
And because it's hard sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It is. Even though after 30 years of this, I would think, oh yeah, but it's never, or generally it's not easy. You get to those places where you're sort of stuck and, this isn't working. And so I think for me, the scariest thing about doing a new house is that for me personally, I want to like it more than the last one, right? I want it to give me more joy when I'm living there and experiencing it day to day than the last one. Otherwise, why did I move? And I'd be really sad. So fortunately, I really like this house and I'm really enjoying it. And so at the moment, I'm not thinking about anything else. But we'll see. Again, in a few years, I'll maybe be ready to. My head will be in a different place, and I'll want to do something else.
But the changes that you're talking about from one house to the next is, not purely functional things like, well, we want a bigger kitchen this time, but you're talking about the more subtle aspects of design.
Yeah.
Right?
For me, that's all that matters. I mean, it's true, before each house, the first house was sort of when my wife and I they were babies, really. So it was kind of the little kid house, or baby house. And then the second house was really they're in kind of lower school, elementary school house. So little kids. And then this third house is sort of the teenager house. Yeah. But honestly, there's that program that obviously we sit down and talk about, but for me, it's really just all about the architecture and the space. And when people, people will ask me sometimes, well, is there something you don't like? What do you like? And they'll say, are you happy with like where you put the dishwasher? And it's like, I don't care. Like, no, I really don't. It's like, as long as all that's great. For me, it's about, is my eye happy as I move through this? Does it give me joy as space, as I see the light move through in the sun and throughout a day? That's all I really care about, is what does it feel like? And for me, this house feels better. And I like the other houses, but this feels better than all the others. I remember the first house, the one thing that used to bother me. See, this is I remember there was this outdoor fireplace, and I always felt like the hearth was like, I don't know, like about like 6 or 8 inches too high off the ground. And it's just every time I would turn that way, it just kind of bothered me a little bit. I don't have any of those feelings here, so that makes me feel good. But that's the stuff. I mean, I know it's stupid, but those are the things that matter.
The things, how do they align or misalign?
Yeah. And if there was something that really just, so I don't look at it around. It just gives me joy. Yeah. Yeah, between the garden and the house, I'm happy.
Do you miss the other houses sometimes?
I don't.
You try not to think about it?
I don't really miss them. I think, I know I've moved on to something else. I still like them, and it's interesting because we've known the people or become friends with the people who ended up buying. Actually, in both cases, both houses ended up being sold to people that we were acquaintances of. They weren't really friends, but then they sort of became friends after they bought our houses. I mean, we knew them before, but and so we still had some relationships with them. But I don't think so. It's okay. I was ready to move on to something else.
That's really
and again, like I said, fortunately, I'm happy with it.
I mean, that's a very special thing, and I think. Like one of the best design educations comes from just analyzing or being open, having open eyes to the place you grew up in or the place that you live, whether or not you designed it, right? Mm-hmm. But then being able to live in something that you designed is like a very remarkable, opportunity to have, and to want to get to have that project, but then to live in it and learn from it. It's like a pretty special thing.
Yeah, I think that any of us are lucky enough to design our own home. I mean, I think I feel so lucky to be able to have done it. And I of course, I get joy out of it from just spatially what it makes me feel like every day being there. But it's interesting too to see then my family interact with it, live with it, others visit it, and you see those interactions. And I mean, I think it slightly gets back to why doing homes somehow is still, really one of my favorite things. There's that intimacy of an individual or a couple, family coming to you to design a home for them. It's an expression in this physical way of what living is, right? In some physical way, what their life is about. Mm-hmm. And I think if they've come to you to do it, okay, there must be something about your architecture that resonates. But still, it's going to be their home. What is this site about? What's their budget like? All these things are going to play into ultimately what that home, is really about. And I think in the end, if you've done it right for those people, all of those things they're looking for are satisfied in terms of the program and even the aesthetics. But hopefully, if you do it right, it's way more than they ever could have imagined, and that they're understanding and feeling for materials and light and space and proportion, that they see it in a different way. Because I think a lot of people, some of our clients definitely come to it with that point of view, but most don't, right? And it's to get them to sort of see architecture differently. I think that's really satisfying too.
And that's one of the biggest challenges we hear from practicing architects is they've gone through that process before. They're educated in it. It's their profession. It's their passion. And so they can see the end result better. And it's difficult to speak to someone who maybe has never even gone through this process, and you're trying to convince them of something that they that they're having to imagine to a certain, they're having to imagine, and it's difficult for, it's a challenging thing. Like, how do I really believe this person when I don't quite understand what they're saying or visualize it,
Yeah, no, it is. The tools are terrific now with what we can do in the computer, but it's still a cartoon. It's still, they still have to take faith in this rendering they're seeing or whatever it might be. And yeah, not all clients are quite willing to listen to everything. It's hard. I mean, I like the client process and that interaction, but what am I trying to say? I guess that there's, although by and large, I think we have really good clients, there's definitely times where you just can't seem to get through to them, what this is really about.
Sure.
And I think, I'd be the first to say that not every project we do gets quite to the place I think it should. It's you need a good client to do a good building. It's hard. Yeah, I mean, I think all architects feel this way. It's there's times where it can be very frustrating.
But it's a relationship, right? So it cannot always be the relationship.
Yeah, but really most of the time it's terrific. But there's times where it's disappointing.
Is there a set kind of design process or philosophy that's very much understood and embodied in the office to make sure that there's consistently high quality work being done?
Well, I think myself and some of the other people who have been there a long time, boy, it's about before I or anyone else in the office starts drawing, I think I'm a huge believer in trying to understand everything we possibly can about that site, the program, the city restrictions, the budget. I think that I want to be really thoughtful about how we approach it. And I think a lot of missteps can be made if you begin drawing before you have a really thorough understanding of all of it. Because there's a little bit of, as you start drawing and moving down some path, and then you find out some information that causes it
undermines
it. It's hard to go back to that blank canvas spot again, even emotionally, I think.
Right.
So I guess I'm a big believer in trying to understand everything thoroughly before beginning. I think when we do begin, I mean, I like to really begin. To me, I'm a huge believer in the site drives everything. I think our projects tend to be, very grounded in what that site's about, the aspects of it, the topography, the sun, the views. All of that is probably where I like to try to begin. I also like to, I think I'm always in the office asking people when they print stuff out for me. I still draw by hand. Obviously, lots of people who just work in the computer nowadays, and I think very successfly. I just personally, I want to use trace and scale, and I like to draw in plan and section and just work through plan and section, many layers. I also, I'm always asking people in the office to print
to scale
down. Well, but down, smaller. Yeah. I think it's very scary to me to, someone sometimes, I want to start working on something and they'll print the survey out. I don't know. It depends on what project it is. Obviously, the scale of the project makes a difference too, big, small, but at 1/8 inch or something, it's oh my God, it's just way too intimidating.
Every detail has to be drawn.
Print this out at a 20th or something. Just much smaller. I think I also like to begin a project. I think this makes sense. Drawing at a very small scale, and then, I think the process naturally works its way up to more and more detail. So it's always funny to me when someone, I think they think this is like something I like. Oh, it's really big plan.
You can see every problem in their
No, it's terrifying. Yeah. Please, smaller.
So what are your drawing tools that you like to use? What kind of pens? You have go-tos?
Yeah, I use. Shoot, I don't have this stuff with me. It's just I use like a. So, well, I use a pencil. It's like literally
radical.
Yeah, like sometimes I'm just using. Well, actually, so when I'm sketching, I'm just using trace, and I'll sketch using. I have two different pentels, just really basic. One a little fatter. One's like a razor point, and the other one is something else, like a little fatter than that. Not as fat as a Sharpie, but I have two. So one that's thin and one that's a little fatter. I literally carry those with me all the time, although I'm sure there are various ones because there's just boxes of them. I'm sure I leave them on people's desks all the time, or people take them from me accidentally, I'm sure, because they're just, they're just around. And then when I go to, so I'm sketching, and then once I get something a little bit like that, okay, this might be working, then I'll use pencil and parallel bar and triangle.
Parallel bar, really?
Yeah, I'm one of the few that still has parallel bar and triangle, and we'll start to draw something roughly, and then once a little bit hard line, and then again I'll throw trace over it with the pentels and go back to something loose, and maybe do 5 or 6 sketches loose, and then okay, maybe I can go back to something hard, and it's kind of this back and forth.
Very interesting.
And then there's a point, I think, in the office, then once I get something that I'm sort of satisfied with, well, now you have this computer that we work in Revit and various things, but I can then hand that to someone who then can put that in the computer, and then suddenly it becomes about them just printing things out, and I'll just sketch over those things.
Right.
So, and obviously you can learn so much so fast from the computer, but I don't I can't, and I don't want to start with the computer. So it's very common in our office. We have lots of tables. We have some tables in the middle of the space. It's a completely open office. We're all just out there together, but where we'll sit down with trace and be sketching over things, and yeah.
So still trace and a mainline?
Well, I do. Yeah. There's probably, I mean this out of the, I don't know what the design total staff is in the office, but let's say out of the 90 people, if it's 90 in the office right now, it's somewhere around there. If there's out of those, maybe there's 70 of those people that are design people, right?
70, you said?
70,
okay.
Right. There might be, how many people that have main lines? 5.
That's not a bad ratio for nowadays.
Oh, yeah, not that many, right?
Yeah. From our exposure, most places it's like 1 or 2, and they're not used.
I use mine.
Yeah,
and I think the other people who have it on their desks do use them, or they wouldn't have them. Right. We have. I mean, if you want one, again, we have the carpenters who will put it on your desk for you.
Perfect.
Yeah,
it's funny. It's the process is interesting to me because. So when I was in school, it was at the very beginning of computer transition. So halfway through-ish, computers became mandatory and had to be used in studio. But in the beginning, we weren't doing that. So you use a mainline and a triangle and stuff. And there's something very calming about being at the parallel bar desk with just your trace and those few utensils, and not being, if you're at your computer, even if it's a workstation or a computer or an office station, you're being bombarded with like emails and other things, and it's kind of nice just to sit with just the trace, and then that's it, and then put another layer of trace and another. The things I always liked were, for whatever reason, a red color erase pencil was like the thing I always used on top of printouts. I don't know why I call a red one, but white trace. I have a thing against yellow trace, and then
we use white as well.
Yeah. Although Louis Kahn used yellow trace, so there's something to it maybe. And then a Pentel pen and some colored markers for kind of diagramming. But there's definitely some kind of, if at the very least, brain power that comes with being able to think through a building or a house, pretty significantly just in plan or just in section, and it's a muscle, and I think if it could maybe also yield better design more often. That's kind of a big statement, but the reliance on a lot of 3D views, I know we were talking about this. There's something that a lot of, I think, younger designers, they don't have that skill because it's just 3D window computer stuff all the time. But being able to stare at a floor plan and think about everything is, that's a specific muscle to have.
Yeah, I think I definitely still see that way, plan section. And I think that, but I'm willing, I think when I'm looking at a plan that someone's brought to me, I think I'm thinking about, what happens as this is coming up vertically and what is that section about? But I guess it works for me, right? But I guess and like you're saying, I'd like to think it's the best way to work. But I do think that for people who have worked the other way, just that's the only way they've ever worked, for them, the other is probably just as powerful. So it's just not what I've done, but I'm willing to give it to them.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think that's fair.
Well, I'm interested to know how and when did you guys thought that you should become a design build?
Oh, right.
Right? Because that's a pretty
bad
big
contractor.
step.
Like that's it.
No. I mean, it's some of that. So again, I think going back to beginnings as young architects, and you're working on these little projects, the level of contractor that we were working with was very low, right? Because the contractors that are doing these little additions or some little thing, they're really they're not very good. It's the bottom line, right? And so I remember, and Leo had some experience framing, doing some work in college. And I remember saying to Leo, and here would be the other aspect. So because I think so many things come together on this. And as an architect too, okay, we both, we're doing this full time now, and you're really financially really struggling to make it work, right? And so then you're being paid a little bit of money to do these architectural drawings. And I think we were always very interested in thoroughness and detail and design and, really trying to do a good job for our clients. And then you'd hand it off to this GC that wasn't very good and they wouldn't do a very good job. And you're always trying to show them, this, oh no, you missed this, all this. And I remember just saying to Leo at some point, especially because more money would have been good, I think we could just do this ourselves. These guys don't know any more than we do.
Right.
They're just, the only difference is truly that they are just willing to take the risk of the responsibility to do it. And sometimes I think they were willing to take the risk because they weren't smart enough to know there was any risk, or because they sort of had to. It was just like, this is how I'm going to make my living. And I think there was a certain point where we were like, oh yeah. So we just we started doing it ourselves, and we had clients. Again, these are little projects generally, but then slowly working towards bigger projects. And on those projects, we would haul the trash to the dump on the weekends. We would sweep. We would do whatever labor we could do, because anything we could do ourselves that we didn't have to pay someone else to do, that was
right. It's a bonus.
Yeah, there were even sometimes where we would hire like some of our architect friends to help. Because you're struggling financially, so it was useful. And then it really just very, very slowly became more than that. Really, in the most organic way. Even I remember having the metal shop. It's that we had an architect who was working for us who was a welder. And there was some project, I think, that had some metal work. Oh my God, very expensive. Oh yeah, you could do that. Okay, yeah, let's get this. And then in the back, you put the well, and then it's like that. That's truly, and the whole thing just slowly, again, over 30 years, slowly, becomes what it is.
But I feel like that's something that we hear a lot of younger firms who are interested in doing the design builds, because you get more control on how your project is being built ultimately. Yeah. And also it seems like the contractor is always the guy that makes more money between the architect and the contractor, right?
Yes.
So doing both makes complete sense.
Yeah, what's wrong with us as a profession? But and I think in a very positive way, when we began doing design build it would be the early 90s, 1990, 91, a couple of years after we started, really there were very, very few, if any, architects doing it. I feel like now in the last, even as long as 15, 20 years, there are design builders, architect-led design build. I think we don't look down on the idea of architect as builder anymore. I think there was a time previously where architect's profession, we don't get our hands dirty, we don't do that. I think we're way past that. I think that there is respect for the idea of architect being builder, and among young people especially, I think there's people who are doing it, trying to do it. It's great.
So you have to have a contractor in-house to do it, or how does that work?
You have to
need some kind of a license,
you have to be. Yeah, you
right?
do. Yeah, you do. So you have to become a contractor. But again, look at the people who have become contractors, and it's all workable. I think that all can be done, and there are architects who are doing it.
That's pretty cool. And so now there's that side, and then there's the furniture, right? And jewelry also.
Yeah. These are right. So again, these are things that just came through the process. Furniture, for instance, because we would design and build a house, and then sometimes a client would ask, "Oh, do you think you could design a dining room table for us," or whatever. So there'd be one-offs, and then my first house, I think we call it Glencoe on our website in Venice. I decided on that house that I would design all the furniture that went into the house, we designed and then made all that furniture. And that house was on the cover of the Sunday New York Times Magazine at some point. And so through that, then we were approached by some furniture distributors about, could they sell the furniture? And so it kind of, again, organically took on a life of its own, where we started making furniture in a more of I think that became like the Glencoe line. Right. And again, by the way, none of this stuff really is a true business. I think it's all too expensive to make, as we do in LA, and it's not. So it's not anything really, but it's fun, and we enjoy making the furniture, and have continued to do it. And the jewelry, this cuff was the first thing. So we were designing a store, the store in Los Angeles, Maxfield. It's a very high-end clothing store in West Hollywood on Melrose at Robertson. And
I think we drove by last week.
And so they sell a lot of jewelry, and the men's jewelry that they sell, a lot of it is sort of this is probably 8 years ago, although it may be the same still. But we would spend a lot of time there at the store, meetings, things like that. And the men's jewelry, I would look at, and it's all very heavy, and I like weight. I like weight. But it's diamond encrusted skulls, and it's
not your style.
No. So I came back one day and drew this and had our metal shop make this for me. And then my wife and a few other people in the office were like, "Oh, we should make jewelry," which is like, honestly, like the last thing in the world that I personally need. But so we did. And so, so I have a few things I make for myself, but mostly my wife, Robin, who's a graphic designer, is her training, but she really has gotten into the jewelry and continues to make it. And so our metal shop in El Segundo, there's one person who all she does is make jewelry all the time. And over the holidays, we'll get some help as well. So again, this is not something that's like,
your master plan.
Yeah. And it's not like, it's really not it's not a big business, I can't say, but for us, I think we enjoy having our hands in many different things, and it's fun to design different things and to make different things. Just like the variety of the building types we design is vast as well. I think a lot of it we do, if it was all just about business, we probably wouldn't do it, but we enjoy it.
And that's pretty cool, because I think during school, especially, architects are doing a lot of different things, right? You're having to draw, design, present, build things with your hands, and you do weird conceptual projects. And that kind of thirst for a variety of things is a fairly common trait among architects. But once you enter the professional world, quote unquote, a lot of times you aren't able to do jewelry or furniture or whatever you kind of comes across your table and you feel like doing because it's interesting to you, and that kind of goes away. It's really nice you guys are able to do this, even if it's just for fun, you know.
The office generally it's busy, so sometimes I feel like we do less of this fun stuff than we'd like to. But the busyness is also, back to the fact that it generates dollars that'll give you the freedom, and I think the office is open to trying to play.
Right.
We've done some urban interventions as well that have been fun over the years.
Really?
Yeah, there's you could find this, I'm sure, online or whatever, but we actually it's come full circle in the best way. The best one we ever did, we've done these projects, it's out there now under the name Heavy Trash is our kind of anonymous name, because the thinking that, and we haven't done this for years, but it was just too busy, but that if we were to get arrested, it would be for littering. So it was always thought, okay, we're going to call this stuff heavy trash. I think the best one that we did, there's a little park surrounded by some streets a few blocks away from us at Bundy and Santa Monica Boulevard that was fenced off at a point now many years ago because homeless people were using the park. And so literally there is a 8-foot tall wrought iron fence around the whole park that is locked 24 hours a day. And there's grass in the space that the gardeners, I guess, come in once a week and unlock the gates and go mow the lawn and then leave, right? And this just seemed so absurd to us.
Yeah.
So we built a steel staircase and ramp that could come up and over the fence and into the park. And one Sunday morning at 5 a.m., we deposited it there. We brought it over with our trucks, and there were probably about 25 of us involved, and set it up and placed it there. And it said, heavy trash and metal on it, and left. And it took the city of LA probably 6 weeks to get it out of there. Well, they put caution tape around it after a couple days, but still, it was wonderful because once you deposit it, then you can kind of go back and use it because they don't know that you did it. So we would walk over there and have lunch, and other people would go over and have lunch, and it was kind of nice to see it getting used. It was great, and there was some. It was written up a little bit, and in any case, we actually recently, through a series of events, found out through some people that the city, through the council's office, was looking to actually make it into something usable again. And we offered our services pro bono we will work on the park. Right. And so we're presently working with the councilman's office to do something to make this accessible to the public again.
Wait, so did they know that you're the ones behind Heavy Trash?
Well, they do. They do now because we told them.
Okay.
And by the way, when we did this that many years ago, I think they even said this. There were people who worked there that were kind of, quietly thrilled that someone did this, because the intentions, I think generally, politics aside, I think, they got that this was crazy,
right,
that this was done. And yet this is what the neighborhood wanted, was to fence it off.
That's really interesting. So, but when it happened, it was under a completely anonymous, whatever name, and no one knew who was.
No. It really, it's only been in the last couple of years now. Okay, we talked, when this came through at the city, so we're like, okay.
Did you guys put stuff over your head to install it?
Well, what we did is we dressed, and we've done this on other projects we've done. There's other things we've done as well, but. we dressed in kind of the orange, like we had like construction suits, like the vests and the hats, and I think we looked. Yeah, we had cones and like No, I think it looked. I think it looked very. I think it looked official enough that no one stopped us.
Right. That's really, really awesome. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing too is like, you guys are probably most well known for the single family houses and that kind of architecture. And one would not expect like, your office to be doing these things at, at midnight or whatever time it was. Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think again, as I was saying before, I think it's that there's an openness to do different things. And yes, I do. There's in terms of design and aesthetics. And I mean, the home is just terrific. But it's wonderful to do these other types of things, whether an urban intervention or a different building type.
So then, talking more specifically about the work you do under the official name of the office, are there specific inspirations that you had at a younger time in your professional career, or now even, that have influenced you or you use as a source of inspiration or reference or anything like that for design?
I mean, not specifically. I think that growing up in California, I do love the general modernist tradition in California from, look, like Schindler's House, his home on Kings Road. I think it's the best thing I know in the city. And I think we live in this city that just historically, when it comes to the single family home anyways, does have an amazing past. And I suppose broadly, whether Wright or Schindler or Neutra, even Green and Green in some broad way of just those indoor-outdoor spaces, the sleeping porches, all the way through to the present, or Ray Cappy. I think broadly, that's because this is where I live. That's what I really see. Of course, I see architecture around the world, and I think my personal favorite architect practicing is Peter Zumthor. I think I again, just the use of materials and the mass. I think the craft of it are all things that really, really resonate with me. But I don't think there's anything I'm looking at specifically, right? It's one of the nice things about being an architect. I think whatever you do over the course of a day, as you drive through the city, just what you see, what you experience, sounds, sights, all of it, I think broadly probably affect what happens the next time you pick up a pen.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you speak about this because, one, I would agree with that. I think it's a fascinating philosophy and it makes sense. But also that the designing aspect for you is you seem very in tune with it, like on a personal and emotional level. Like you had mentioned, whether or not a space is successful, a lot of it is how it feels when you're in the space,
Yeah.
And that's quite different than I think maybe, I don't know, maybe approaching architecture as being much more mathematical or kind of like A plus B equals C and therefore D and X, Y or whatever. Yeah. And therefore it's good,
Yeah, I don't, no. I'm not there.
No, no. So then are there specific things, the indoor-outdoor seems to be a heavy component or a big aspect of something that you are always looking into with residential in California, right? Are there other things also that seem to be consistent questions maybe?
So indoor-outdoor issues, and by the way, I think it's not only on residential projects. I think in any project is what do you see through to how, I think those are, even if you can't literally go outside, there's still that connection often, or specifically not. I think, but I do think there's other things. I think sound as you're walking and how different spaces, the liveness or deadness, I think makes differences to me. light. I do think sometimes I'm as I'm working, as I'm designing, I think about in maybe a little bit of a like cinematic way, like how you're moving through the space, right? As you maybe approach and then turn, and like how you move through and what you see, and going from light to dark, whatever that might be. I definitely see it as it's like a little bit of a story as you move through from outside to in, maybe back out, back in, but that path, like maybe sometimes in my head, a little bit like a camera moving through. I think, by the way, like I said, the only thing I ever wanted to do was architecture, but I think if I couldn't do that, the only other profession that seems fascinating to me is kind of cinematography.
Right.
Like I'd be happy to be the person behind the camera.
Right.
You know, and movies like my favorite directors would be, you know, Antonioni, Coppola, things where it's really like, I think I can sometimes watch a movie and like not even hear all the words, because I think I can just be stuck in the sounds of the set and the music, just the sounds broadly, and what you see, right? And the light and the darks of a film. Yeah. Boy. But so I think sometimes architecture can be that way as well.
Yeah.
I think I'm also sometimes thinking about, this is probably where Zumthor seems so amazing to me, but I think I feel really good about a project, and I think it's hard to get to this place nowadays, but where I can imagine it as a ruin many, 100 years later, just engulfed by the landscape, and I really like it. Like in a way, like, right, where you can sort of imagine where just the forms and all of it, just in a decomposed state, would somehow halfway gone, would be really captivating. So I think, and the reason I say it's hard to get to that is because I think so often, I don't know that we're building always with materials that are going to, decompose beautifully.
Right.
So, but I think broadly, I think about that.
That's a pretty deep thought. I mean, and then there's something about the raw form of the house or the building that has some kind of quality that is timeless, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
At that point.
That's the goal. Yeah. I think, right. At least to me, I think within the office, I think we're always, we want to do something that's timeless. We want to imagine that in 20, 30 years, it's still going to be good.
Right.
It's disappointing. Sometimes I think back to the client side. Sometimes I think you can be disappointed to be pulled to something that's more, it's in right now.
Trendy.
Yeah, trendy.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing, I think, to be tugged that way, because you just sort of feel like, this is for the moment. And I understand sometimes when we're working on, I mean, this is not how I would choose to do it, but there's occasions, I think, working on a retail store or a restaurant where I think the client really wants to pull that way, and it's too bad. I don't think they should, but I think that can happen.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting philosophy to have for different types of architecture too. Well, like with restaurants, there's heavy turnover, but for like houses, and I mean, the houses that you designed and lived in are a perfect example. They get passed on to different types of people and different generations and things. So it having to work, again, not just at a functional level, but at whatever higher design kind of level, is a very nuanced and tricky area to try and operate and to create things within.
Yeah, I feel like when I see homes being built, I mean, I feel like there are definitely architects that feel very comfortable doing something that maybe is just of this moment only. And I think they maybe even understand it to be that way. Yeah. I don't feel very comfortable doing that. I'd rather imagine it sitting in that community, on that property for a long time, and always being something that will be a positive for that neighborhood. Yeah.
This was like super interesting, and then covering all these different things. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover? Well, okay. Yeah. What's your favorite place to eat in Los Angeles? That's the good question.
Okay. I like a mountain in Venice, MTN.
MTN in
Well,
Venice.
they just spell it MTN.
Okay.
It's on Abbot Kinney. It's a Japanese sort of more about vegetables and by the way, architecturally, it's a really beautiful sort of indoor outdoor space. Like that gets sometimes really cold in the winter because it's just so open. Again, in the best way. But the food's terrific.
Gotcha, mountain. Okay.
Yeah.
It's on the checklist now.
Okay. It's good. It's really good.
Well, thanks again. And hearing your thoughts about design and the houses and the staircases going over into parks and stuff is really great. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's episode of the Midnight Charette. And shout out to our guest, Ron. Very, very interesting. And we hope you enjoyed it. If you like what we're doing, support our show by leaving a review in iTunes. I know a lot of you are like, I'm not on iTunes. Well, that's really the only place you can leave a review because that's how podcasts work, unfortunately. But we're also on Spotify and YouTube on occasion, like this episode. And what else?
We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have a hotline. You can call it, leave a voicemail, text it, and we will try and respond to it as soon as we can, and maybe even use your recording to have a whole conversation around it in one of our next episodes. So the number is 213-222-6950. Don't be shy. Drop us a line.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you again for listening. It means a lot. And we hope all of you are staying safe during these times. And we will talk to you again this week.
Oh, yeah.
Or sooner.
Okay.
Or later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.